Gary, the moment you and every single Manchester United fan has been dreading is finally upon us. Liverpool are Premier League champions. How have you been coping with that? And I've heard it's nice in Papua New Guinea at this time of
year. I wish I was there. Found me far too quickly. 4 days underground wasn't enough. Obviously we've known it's been coming for some time. The only doubt, obviously, was coronavirus. And once football returned, it was inevitable Liverpool going to be made champions. They absolutely have been the best team this season. What Jurgen Klopp's done there. I mean, he came in 4 years ago, and I, at that time, never thought Liverpool would be capable of mounting a league title challenge. Just felt all the other clubs had far bigger budgets. Liverpool obviously were in a deep rut over many, many years, understanding that they've got a great fan base, they're a club of history and had success, and you can never write clubs like that off. But to go and win a league title in front of the investment of Chelsea, of City, of Manchester United, I just didn't think was possible. And what he's done there over a 3 or 4 year period has been absolutely outstanding. Everything at a football club comes from a manager. He sets the tone for everybody, the fan base, the ownership. He sets the tone for the players, and he's basically galvanised Liverpool over a 3 year period, brought everybody with him. Put a brilliant team together. The recruitment, and not just obviously Jurgen Klopp's recruitment, the club's recruitment's been absolutely spot on, precise, laser focused. They've brought every single player they've made count. Every single player has fit a mould. Every single player fits the principles of Klopp. There's been no sort of veering away from day one when Benteke was seen as being not fitting the profile, and a few others, moved aside. He's got quick, energetic strikers who make the perfect runs. He's got a defence that is formidable. He's got a goalkeeper who's the best in the world at this moment in time. And in the midfield, he's got what would be reliable,
honest players.
Really good personalities in Henderson, Milner, Fabinho, Wijnaldum, who are none of them individually, you would say, outstanding and the best in the world in that position, but you put them together as a collective with that defence, those fullbacks and that strike force, and they actually become what would be almost like a rock in the middle of it all. And it's just it's a fantastic team. They've been brilliant to watch for 3 years. Painful for me. You've seen it come in when you get to Champions League final and they lose. You have a little smirk and you think, here we go, it's getting great. They're going to get so near. But then when they went and won the Champions League the following year and chased City like they did to the point whereby they could have been worthy champions in that season, it was actually coming, and they were knocking on the door so hard. So you've got to congratulate the champions. It's a great achievement. Obviously something that's horrible for every Manchester United fan, for the modern Manchester United fan, a moment they've never seen. For a Manchester United fan who grew up in the late 70s and 80s, it's a moment that ultimately we never wanted to see again, but we saw a lot in our early years. So you've got to say well done. It's a brilliant achievement with a budget that, to be fair, he spent money on players, but generally to work within a sort of net spend that he has to amass that team has been a perfect combination of great coaching and brilliant recruitment.
So worthy champions then, however painful that may be for you to admit that. In terms of whether they're regarded in 50 years' time, say, as one of the greatest Premier League champions, Premier League teams, a lot of that will hinge on the next couple of years and whether they were able to put a run through of 2-3 titles in a row. And in this edition of Off Script, we want to look at the art of defending the Premier League, if you like, and something you know a thing or two about. And I want to start with this quote from Sir Alex Ferguson. He says, "After it is gone, winning the trophy doesn't mean anything to me. At the time, it is the most cherished thing. As soon as it's over, it's not forgotten, but it evaporates. Your next step is the most important one, and the mentality at Manchester United is of that nature. The players are brought up to go for the next thing." How early into your time at Manchester United was that drummed into you, and how valuable was that when it came to your first title defence?
It was normal. I mean, it's just really normal. Whether in my first season, the first team, we lost the title and FA Cup in a week. And even sort of responding from that, whether you won 1 year or lost 1 year, you had to respond by winning. And it was just normal at the club. It was already set by the time I got there. the club had won back-to-back titles and a double in 93, 94 and 92, 93. So the sort of scene was set, the standards had been set by the time I got into the first team proper. I'd obviously travelled with the squad a lot in those first 2 titles, but not played a lot of games. I only played a couple of games, actually. So the reality of it is, it's something that becomes normal to you. And I think that what we've seen with City this year is just a slight drop-off in performance from the previous 2 years where they set an unbelievable standard. But greatness in terms of what would be, you say, look back in 50 years, will be measured by an era, by a period. It won't be measured by one season. And what Liverpool have done in the last 3 seasons is start to create an era. You know, getting to a Champions League final, winning a Champions League, winning a league. You know, you've got to say that they're in the midst of something here. So if they can go and win it again next year and get to another Champions League final or do a domestic double or something like that, that's when you're starting to talk about a really great side. And what Sir Alex Ferguson had at Manchester United was the ability to create a great side that won over a 3 or 4 year period, but then remodel it and adapt it to be able to win again over the next 3 or 4 year period. And he continually did that over a period of 20 years, which was obviously the genius of him and why he would be regarded as the greatest manager. But what Jurgen Klopp has done at Liverpool is simply outstanding. He hasn't had the resource of Pep Guardiola, hasn't had the resource of the Manchester United managers over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And he's been able to, with, like I say, laser focus, precision-based recruitment, develop a great team.
There's a quote from Ryan Giggs in 2012 where he said, winning the trophy for the first time, a Premier League for the first time, doesn't compare to retaining it. And the stats sort of back that up. Manchester City are the only side in the last 11 seasons to win back-to-back titles.
Yeah.
Can you explain why repeating something that you've achieved a couple of months prior is more difficult than overcoming all of those unknowns and the pressure of winning it for the first time?
True. I mean, look, true greatness is consistency and being able to repeat your standards year on year. There are many teams, many players, many athletes who have had one-off successes that have won single titles, and they're a great achievement in their own right. But when you continually do it over a period of time, that's where you establish the greatness. And I think what Ryan's referring to there is that when you look back over a period of time, someone who won 13 Premier League titles in his career and played to the age of 40, he achieved greatness because of his longevity. You know, we talk about obviously talent and skill and great players, but the real sort of what you want to be doing at the end of your career is looking back where you've had longevity, you've played for a long time, you've sustained your success, and you've just demonstrated that consistency and that reliability to be able to play well every single year as a team and as an individual. And that's where I think obviously Pep Guardiola's had that now as a manager. Jurgen Klopp's got that now as a manager with his achievements. You know, these are consistently brilliant performers who can win and win no matter what club they're at.
In terms of that consistency then, would you say, and if you look back at your title wins, were those the sweeter ones when you did, so say around the turn of the century when there were 3 Premier League titles in a row and you knew that you'd found the level of consistency that you were able to maintain for a good amount of time?
No, to me the most. I mean, Ryan, I'm surprised Ryan said that, but you know, it's each to their own in terms of how you feel after a certain title. And I always felt it was more sweet when we'd lost it and then we won it back.
Right.
You know, I remember in 2006, you know, we've got our trophy back. We'd not won it for 3 years. We had obviously Jose Mourinho's Chelsea and Arsene Wenger's Invincibles. That 2006 one for me was one of the sweetest because it felt like we were in a period where we might just drop away and not win it again. And obviously then from 2006 through to 2011, I think won it 4 or 5 times. So the period, to be fair, where you don't win it and you realise you're up against great sides and then you win it back is where sort of I felt the most happy. 99 was special, but 2006, the first one and 2006 were probably my most special ones in the sense that the first one, 95, 96, we'd lost the double the year before in my first sort of what would be full season, and you think you're never going to win it. But when you win it that first time, it's just a big hurdle. And obviously you repeat it, it's great, but then when you lose it and you win it back, I felt more satisfied with that because, like I say, we'd come up against 2 really great teams in that Arsene Wenger team and Jose Mourinho's team.
If you look back at your career at Old Trafford, then you were sort of involved in 3 distinct phases where you came through the ranks and the old guard like Bruce, Pallister, Brian Robson were there. Then in the middle, you were the established players and that group you came through the youth system. And then towards the end, You were the older statesman, if you like, in the team, bringing through the next generation. How did your role change? You won titles throughout all that time, but how did that role, your role in the team, change and evolve throughout those different phases in the club's history?
Yeah, I always refer to that as the conveyor belt that Sir Alex created over a period of years, where sort of the players came in young and then grew to be more experienced, and then obviously became the elder statesmen and the standard bearers in the dressing room, the ones who had the experience. And the roles changed, dramatically in the first 3, 4, 5 years. You are like a baby. You do need that comfort from the experienced players and that knowledge and know-how and experience passed down to you. Once you've got that middle part of your career is really a real great period, in the sense that you're in this. Can you hear that phone ringing? No.
No, you're right.
Phone ringing?
You can carry on.
Sorry about that. Very unprofessional. That middle part of your career is a great period, because that's where you've got the level of experience that you need that first 5 or 6 years in the first team. You've won trophies, and you're in that period where you're experienced, but you're at your most physically fit and you're just mentally strong. You've been through your first dip, which I went through when I was 24. So from the age of, they say, 27 to 32, you really are in a period of the zone where everything becomes a lot more simple. You feel like you're strong, energetic, you're unbreakable. And that's how I felt in the middle of my career, where you still had more experienced players that you respected, but you're building your own level of respect because your performance levels then were consistent over 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Once you go beyond that, you become different again, because you start then to be energised by the younger players. In our case, it was likes of Wayne Rooney, Cristiano Ronaldo, Raphael obviously coming through at that time. It was just a different period altogether. And there you feel like you're sort of guiding the younger players, making sure they're staying on the right tracks, doing the right things. Obviously, finding it a little bit more difficult yourself in terms of recovery from matches, but a lot more experience and knowledge on the pitch if something goes wrong, a lot more experience in the dressing room after a game in a season when you've lost a game and people are saying it's a crisis, and you've been there before and you've seen it and you're relaxed, and you just say, look, relax, we're okay, we can win the next game, and you sort of settle everything down. So you really go through those different periods in your career, all very different. First one is the most raw and exciting, because you don't know what's going to happen next. You've never been there before, and you're just exploring. The middle bit is one where you really are sort of, let's say, polished, and the last bit is where you're a bit wiser and you're seeing the end coming.
Obviously, Liverpool are in the first section of that now. With James Milner is the only player in their squad who's actually won the Premier League before, let alone retained it. So
yeah.
You obviously don't want to indulge too much information, but what sort of advice could you give this Liverpool team, and what sort of roles can you see different players adopting?
Go and celebrate, lads. Enjoy your summer. Just have a load of drinks, chill out. You don't worry about next season whatsoever.
It doesn't matter.
No, I mean, the challenge is always now. I saw an article this morning which I thought was interesting. Don't know how true it is. I was up this morning. We've got the Brighton Man United game tonight, and it said that Jurgen Klopp wasn't going to enter into the transfer market. He was going to trust in his young players coming through. And I thought, interesting. One, you like the principle, of course you do, because you want young players to come through, obviously, in English football. They've had success, obviously, with Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he's been absolutely sensational. But then on the other hand, you don't want to be on that sort of, we're okay, we're as good as we can be, and you're not improving. So there's that balance and that sort of challenge that a manager has when he's created a really good team that's won a league and he's won a Champions League, whereby he's saying, is everything okay? Or do you change it before it needs changing, or do you actually leave it as it is and maybe they become a bit stale and a little bit comfortable? And that's the challenge of a great manager. That's where Sir Alex over many, many years obviously got it right, where, he poked players that were sort of getting comfortable. He nudged them. He'd bring a player in to challenge them. He'd do different things. He'd leave you out the team for a week or two. And Jurgen Klopp will have those challenges now. I always remember when Pep Guardiola came in to do Monday Night Football after the first season. They won the title. Obviously, the first season at the club, he didn't win the title, and the next season he did. And I remember him saying a line to me off camera. He said, I can guarantee you the players will like me a lot less next season, because I'm going to demand more from them to get what I need to win back-to-back titles. And I thought it was an interesting line from him, to demand more. And Jurgen Klopp's just going to have to sort of, whip that horse a little bit harder next season, just to get them sort of knowing that you can't just drop off that 2 or 3%, because then City will be back at you and other clubs will be sort of catching you again. City had shown them the standard, Liverpool had got there, then you've got to maintain it. And there were times at United in my career where we won the Champions League in '99, we thought we got there, we'd fought for years, 3 or 4 years to get there, past Juventus, past Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich, these great clubs. And when you get there, you just drop that 2 or 3% next year and you're off. You're gone again, and you're not winning it again for, what was it, 8, 9 years. So, it's a fine line between, settling the team down and making sure they're comfortable and that they're obviously rewarded for the achievements they've made, and consistency and stability of a squad's fantastic, but also making sure that you obviously nudge them. And that's what Sir Alex had with us. He pushed us and invested, and at times, signed players that meant that other players were being challenged that had been previously comfortable.
I just want to touch on the role transfers play again, if you like, because looking back at your time at Manchester United, three titles in a row, 99, 2000, 2001. Didn't make a single signing for that third season. And then the next year you brought Van Nistelrooy in, Sebastian Veron, Diego Forlan, and you finished third. And should managers stick with a winning formula, or isn't it as simple as that? Should they go and spend? It's hard, like you said, it's really hard to get that balance. And do you reckon Klopp's really assessing that at the moment?
He's got a similar conundrum actually that I can see developing that Sir Alex had with different parts of the team. Sir Alex had a midfield four that I think is the best midfield four that British football will ever see. Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, David Beckham and Roy Keane. And how could you break that four up? There were other players like Jesper Blomqvist and Nicky Butt who came into that midfield and played games. But they quite obviously at times when the big games came along, they sort of stepped aside and we've sort of had that four. And you've got the same with the front three at Liverpool with Mane, Salah and Firmino, where they're that good that you end up with like an Origi supporting them or a Shaqiri. Whereas if you really try and bring in a world-class player to challenge them, then one of those world-class players that they've already got and the world-class player you bring in, one of them has to sit on the bench. Or you try and shoehorn one into midfield and then they change the dynamic and you lose a bit of something there. Because you tend to think that maybe, okay, we'll leave Henderson out or we'll leave a Milner out or we'll leave a Wijnaldum out to get Firmino back in midfield. But all of a sudden, then you lose the balance and you lose that sort of authenticity to the team that you've had before and that honesty. And that was a challenge that Sir Alex had, I think, in that period of how you change the dynamic. 4 strikers, Cole, Sheringham, York and Solskjaer. You couldn't get 4 better strikers for the club. So how do you again split that dynamic up? Eventually, it took 2 or 3 years and Ruud came in and Juan Sebastian Veron came in and then the dynamic of the club changed for a couple of seasons and things just more, it took a bit of time. So, there have been those periods where, Keane and Ince as a midfield pair at Manchester United were absolutely out of this world. But Sir Alex wanted to bring Paul Scholes into the team. He wanted to bring Nicky Butt into the team. So he let Paul Ince go. And you've got to make big decisions at the right point and sell people at the right point. And I don't think Jurgen Klopp's at that point yet with obviously the players that he's got. But he'll be thinking, how does he adapt, challenge, improve this team or maintain its standard over a period of the next 12 to 18 months. And they are sometimes difficult decisions to have to make, but good decisions to have to make because obviously you're doing it from a winning position.
You talk about how can he sort of develop it. The transfer market might not actually be what the avenue he goes down. And if you look back at Fergie's time at United, he always sort of, as you mentioned, there were cycles behind the scenes in his coaching setup. So he had Brian Kidd, Steve McLaren, Mike Phelan throughout the years. Yeah. How did that manifest itself in training from a player's perspective? And how did he sort of mastermind so that United stayed ahead of curve and the next season they weren't found out by the opposition? Because everyone's eyes are on the champions, aren't they? The next season, they're the scalp everyone wants. How did he manage to keep them ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things over 20-odd years, Sir Alex did very little on the training pitch from a coaching point of view. So because the changes of assistant managers and coaches all happened every 3 or 4 years, Brian Kidd to Jim Ryan, Mike Phelan, Steve McLaren, Carlos Queiroz, René Meulenstein, you always had a situation where you were hearing a different voice. So that stimulated you from a training program point of view and took you in a different direction. And I think that's something that's vitally important. The club invested enormously in Sir Alex's time in the training centre and in the sports science department and the medical department. So we were always moving in the right direction with that element. Manchester United's training ground will have been a forerunner and a pioneer in 2000. It was out of this world. Obviously, other clubs have now obviously invested in their training facilities and caught up and do what clubs do. But at the time, Manchester United's move, which was an unpopular one with the players, some of us anyway, particularly me and the other young players from the Cliff training ground where we've been since, I've been there since 1986 as an under-11 and loved the place. It was like a soul to it that was unbelievable. It was everything that I ever wanted. It was our pitch, it was our changing room, it was tight, but it was obviously not fit for purpose for what would be a modern football club trying to obviously explore. The Italian teams had invested heavily at that time in sort of what would be their training centres in these remote sort of places and locations that were really sort of what would be, like say, performance labs. You had the Milan lab that was famously sort of named around that time. And I think Manchester United moved in that direction through Sir Alex's sort of adaptation to what would be more modern methods. So you're always challenged by that. If a manager's going to stay for a long period of time, there has to be changes along the way, particularly if the players are going to stay as well. And that change came from obviously those methods that I've just mentioned, but also the changing voice on the training pitch, which was through obviously Sir Alex's assistant managers wanting to go on and prove themselves as managers over the years.
Final thoughts, Gary, and a final quote, but this time from Jose Mourinho, who, if I remember rightly, has won 3 Premier League titles. He doesn't go on about it at all, does he? Anyway, after his triumph in 2015, he said, there are 2 sorts of champions. There are champions who win something, and there are lots of them. But there are champions who win 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 or more titles. Which category do you think this Liverpool team will fall into?
I know which one I hope it falls into. You've won your title now. Do one. Go on. Have another 30 years off.
Seriously? Are you concerned?
No, I'm not. I'd be concerned. Do you know what would concern me about Liverpool if they were, if for a long period, it would concern me if Liverpool, to be fair, were bought out by super rich owner who invested at the level of Manchester City, Manchester United. Liverpool's still in their sort of what would be transfer business are still quite modest compared to the other clubs. Well, they are modest compared to the other clubs. Are we
seeing that now with post-coronavirus and sort of?
We are. Their owners don't have the money of obviously Manchester City. They don't have the spending power of a Manchester United or a Chelsea. They just don't. But that makes Jurgen Klopp's achievement all the more great, and that's why you've got to really hand it to him. It's an absolutely brilliant performance from him, and I have to say the people behind the scenes who've recruited with him over the last few years, they've done it absolutely brilliantly. This wasn't a surefire winner by any stretch of the imagination. Liverpool winning the league in the last 4 years. They haven't won it for 30 years. They've always been in a club who've invested just at a level below Chelsea, City, United, even Arsenal. So you think about Liverpool and you think, yeah, they're a massive club. They're one of the most successful clubs in the country. But it's so much more difficult without, obviously, the money to be able to spend that the other 3 or 4 clubs are spending. You see Tottenham invest in their stadium like they have done, and you think, well, what's going to happen there over the next 5 or 10 years? So I think that at this moment in time, Jurgen Klopp is overachieving with what he's doing. The players are obviously overachieving, but they're great players. And like I say, he's turned £30 million players into £130 million players. Some clubs turn £130 million players into £30 million players. That's the problem.